This is excerpt from the Historical Adventures of Lightning Gray, Cakewalker. And throughout this manuscript, I have taken license with these characters, meaning that they exist mainly in my imagination. I write these stories compelled by a deep yearning and a longing to hear the voices of those whose blood fertilized America's fruited plains. The majority of these characters are fictional and serve as a reminder of those whose names were not written down and whose stories were not told. However, there are a few factual, larger-than-life individuals who serve this country literally, whose stories are legendary but seldom told. The following is one of them. The character used here to bring Mr. Bass Reeves to life is made up, but Mr. Reeves himself is written about in only a few history books. I have taken license with the storyline, but I would have the reader and the listener to know that Black Bass Reeves actually served as a chief protector and enforcer of law and order as a U.S. Marshal in the Badlands of these yet-to-be United States, and he is an ancestor that should fondly be remembered. This is the story of the real Lone Ranger. This is Hash Feathers speaking on Bass Reeves in Muskogee, Oklahoma in 1919. Now, folks say my corned beef tastes so good to make you quit your religion. That is, if you had any religion in the first place. Wasn't much of it in the West. Truth of it is, I could take a bean and make a banquet. I could turn a mess into a meal. I was born in Echota, Georgia, Cherokee Nation, in 1838. I was sold off when I was 12 to a South Carolina hog farmer, cause I was big and strapping. I escaped that Spartanburg slop bucket in the summer of '61. I changed my name, and after walking the railroad north and west for more than a year, I found myself in Leroy, Kansas, around July or August of '62, I think it was. I joined the Union Indian Home Guard Regiment to fight against them slavers I had just escaped from. When I was back in Chota, my mama had showed me a few tricks for cooking. Come to find out, I had a knack for slapping meals together. That's when they started calling me Hash, you see. So I become fresh cook. She taught me how to take a cabbage and a sweet yam, then dirt bake them so they taste like meat. Showed me how to take some goobers, them peanuts for you city fellas, stew them into a sauce with some ginger and cayenne, lay that portion on a rabbit or a chicken, and have folk licking their fingers. And my hash, well, folks say Jesus stepped his foot in every kettle I made. So I cooked my way through the war, and after the emancipation, I stayed on doing odd jobs around Leroy and other towns, twixt Kansas and Arkansas. But this here talk ain't about me. It's about the fastest man with a shooting iron I ever seen in my life, who also become my best friend. Now, after piddling around for 10 years or so, I found myself buying goods one day in the general store at Fort Smith over in Arkansas. I ain't never gonna forget it, cause that's the day I met Black Bass Reeves. As I recollect, it was June of '75. It's real hot, real dry that day. So dry that when he walked in the store, a cloud of dust seemed to stop at the door sill behind him. It's like as if feared to touch him. He's a big fella, seemed to fill up the whole door sill. He had a ready grin on his face, and his eyes met the eyes of everybody in that store. After a spell of shopping, he plopped a sack of oats down on the floor at the counter, turned in my direction. He said, "You that cook hash I hear tell got away with victuals and such?" I smiled and said, "Yes, sir, that be me." And he went on back to gathering rations, sugar, molasses, cornmeal, and the like. He always kept a silver dollar in his hand, and he run it back and forth across the back side of his fingers. Damnedest thing you ever see. He turned in my direction again and moseyed over. He looked at me hard, he said, but his eyes was kind, you see. He said, "I got some work for you. It's good pay, but it's hard riding." Now, I knowed who Bass Reeves was, 'cause there's no way you could mistake him for nobody else. Black Bass, they call him. He toted 2 black-handled coats, tight butt forward, and his boots was spit shine. He wiped the dust off him as soon as he walked in the store. He had a great big old handlebar mustache. He wore a wide-brimmed black Stetson hat and a pinstripe waistcoat that had the look of a gentleman. But if none of them things give away who he was, that shiny U.S. Marshal law badge sitting on his waistcoat give him away for true. Now, I'd only been round the fort for the better part of a month and ain't have nothing steady, so I ain't even had to think on it. I said, "When we riding out?" He put that big old grin back on his face and said, "About a week or so." That was the beginning of a friendship that lasted the better part of 30 years. One of the kindest gentlemen I ever know. He used to keep a bag of them silver dollars, and I knowed by my count that he must have give away mayhap hundreds or mayhap even thousands of them things to peoples over the years. Now, over all them years that I was his cook and wagon man, I seen some things that is fit for storybooks and the moving pictures. Like, the man ain't have no fear in him. I seen him stare down a 10-foot black bear and run him off with a torch from our campfire. I remember we was up in the Missouri hills and he had a talk, a honest-to-God talk with a mountain lion. He told that lion that if she ain't want to be killed, then she shouldn't come down where he was. That man hollered up the rise and told that lion that if she wanted to stay alive to tend to her cubs, then she best stay put. I asked him how he know the lion was a female from that far away. He just looked at me and smiled. To this day, I still ain't figured that out. But he's clever in ways that make you know God was seeing after him. Like most of the men we caught over the years, some real hard fellas. There ain't no gunplay in it at all, 'cause he'd use contraptions and trickery, you see. Like, I remember we had a warrant for Sam Waters, who had gunned down 2 Texas lawmen over in San Antonio. He used a stuffed rattlesnake to spook Sam's horse coming through a narrow pass. We had dug a hole deep enough to bury a man and his horse in it. That horse sink that dead snake with it rattled up and head set for striking and bolt right into the pit we dug. Bass tossed a rope round Sam and told him, he say, "You can do the choosing. You can either climb out live or be drug out dead." I remember the thing that bothered Bass the most about it wasn't that Sam Waters had broke his arm, but that he had to put Sam's horse down 'cause she had broke both her front legs in the fall. He's real sad about that. Then his horse was smarter than most of the crooks we was chasing. He had a big dapple gray white Appaloosa, named a Silver, he called it. He had a white mane and a white tail, looked like some silk a Chinaman made. That horse so pretty, coat shine like the Mississippi in moonlight, and the spots on her look like them silver dollars he be flipping all the time. I remember we after one-eyed Clem Hawkins had raped and killed 5 Cherokee squaws right here in the Oklahoma Territory, and we had chased him clear to Texarkana. Now, every outlaw that heard the name of Bass Reeves, whilst they might have been a little too mean to tremble in their boots at the hearing of it, they's bound to squirm in their saddles a mite on account of the uneasiness that come with the name of Black Bass, if you was an outlaw. I recall we was at Robertson Creek or the Saline River one, I ain't certain for true, but we had just unhitched and tethered the horse off to make camp. Silver started snorting and pawing the ground when 3 shots rang out. Bass looked down 'cause his boot spur had been shot off. The looking down at his boot spur saved his life 'cause the next shot blowed his Stetson off his head clear into the covered wagon. And as I'm thinking back to it, if it weren't for Silver raising that ruckus, that first shot would have gut wounded him. The next shot blowed a hole through his coat sleeve. That man ain't so much a flinch. He's calm as lake water. He walked behind the wagon, grabbed one of his Winchesters, and took his time doing it. 3 more shots rang out, one of which struck the turnbuckle on the hitching post, and a spark jumped from it that spooked me and the horses. I like to pee my britches. He just slowed his breathing, sighted the rifle in the crook of his left arm. Took so long before he pulled the trigger, seemed like he aimed for half a day. He fired 1 shot, and I'm still trying to figure where exactly the shot's coming from in the first place, 'cause I ain't seen nobody yet. Now, I had heard many stories about how Bass Reeves wasn't even allowed to take part in turkey shoot contests or any rodeo shooting or nothing, 'cause he'd win every time. Kit Carson, Bill Hickok, Nat Love, none of them fool with Bass when it come to shooting knives. And that's the day I found out that it wasn't no make-believe legend that they's talking, 'cause that man with that 1 shot had plugged Clem square in his neck. Now, mind you, Clem was using a tree for cover across the creek at more than 100 yards, and I ain't never seen him, not once whilst he was shooting. I ain't never seen him at all, not till the next day after we crossed the creek and gathered his body for the bounty. And that's the Lord witness truth. Now, I guess it can go without saying when you think back on it, how things was in the West. That when it come to justice, not every man that Bass caught made it back to the law at Fort Smith for trial. Some justice was delivered and court was held right where it was met. I recollect they was 5 marauders who was still flying Confederate colors and wearing their gray rail, called themselves the Turnbull Gang. They had lynched a whole family of black homesteaders, the mother, the father, and their 2 sons up near Topeka, strung them up. Then they lit on a small band of about 20 or so Cherokee down around El Dorado way and slaughtered the whole lot of them. They scalped them and burnt them at the stake. Most people don't know that it was white men that started scalping in the West. It weren't Indians, see. It was white men, because the army would pay for every scalp a white man brought to the forts, you see. Anyway, them Turnbulls had raped all them women's and stabbed them to death. The savageness of that camp still hurt my heart to this day, recollecting back on it. Me and Bass buried every one of them, both the family of coloreds and the Cherokee. I could still see clear. Chief Dancing Eagle surrounded our camp with about 100 of his braves the night after we buried him, and he was full painted for war. He come set it out fire. Bass promised him on his word that he'd bring the devils what did it to justice. Most times he was glad-spirited, but them ribs had sucked the mustard right up out of him this time. I ain't never seen him cry, but that night he come real close to it. We tracked them ribs for now on to a month before we come upon a little mud puddle of a town named Hogsback over in Kansas, where we run into Seminole Sam Bennett, who done some scouting for us from time to time. I remember it was the fall of '88. I recollect that so well because I remember the chill that come over me when Seminole Sam told us that he had seen them turnbulls up at the rail station in Ellis. He say he's at delivery and overheard them talking at the feed stable. They's plotting to go raise the little black town of Nicodemus up yonder, about 50, 60 miles or so. Bill said he heard one of the Johnny Rebs say, "Can you believe them niggers got their own bank?" A dead quiet come over Bass for a spell. He looked at Seminole Sam, looked at me. He say, more to himself than to us, he say, "The devil is a liar." Then he say, "If we ride real hard, we can beat him there." We purchased 6 speed ponies and a pack horse in Hogsback and lit out before dusk. We rid them ponies 2 each till they's winded almost to the death, then turned them loose. I think we covered most of 60 miles in a driving rain before the sun come up. Right before dawn, we spotted the Rebs camped across the Solomon River, just west of Nicodemus. The rain driving so hard we know they never hit us, so I thought we just gonna light on them. But Bass had a plan. We kept riding into Nicodemus and went straight to Zach Fletcher's, who was a friend. We roused the town sheriff, got 2 deputies, and went to the bank. Next memories I had like somebody took a branding iron and burnt it in my brain. Everything seemed to move slow like in one of them newfangled moving picture shows they got everywhere nowadays. The Turnbulls made up of Jake McCloskey, Ed Dinkins, Big Al McCloskey, Jake's brother, Slim Ledbetter, and 3-Finger Fred White. 4 of them walked into the Solomon River Bank and Trust like they owned the place. Big Al stayed out front so as to keep watch. Jake looked round slow and say, "Which one of you niggers run this here bank?" Black Bass say, "I don't see no niggers here, Jake. You must have walked into the wrong bank." Jake swung his head round quick to where Bass was speaking from behind him. He took in me and Seminole, then Zach Fletcher and the 2 townsmen what were deputized. A look of fearation hid his eyes for just a tick. He say, "You be Bass Reeves?" Bass nodded his head. The meanness come back in Jake's eyes just as fast as it left him. He had 4 or 5 teeth missing. What was left looked like rotten apples. And he say, I'll never forget. He looked round at his clan with a devil's grin and he say, "Not only am I gonna make us some money today, boys, but I'm gonna kill me a nigger marshal to boot." There's a quiet come over that bank that the only other place I ever hear that much of it was in a funeral parlor. I remember Bass looked everybody in that bank to the eye. Then he looked back at Jake. And he flipped one of them silver dollars through his fingers. He ain't never raised his voice. And he say, "Well, I guess you should make your play." 3-Finger Fred was the first to slap his left. He ducked down when he drawed, and Bass put a bullet through his left eye. One of the deputies had 2 pistols already drawn and cocked behind the counter. He put 2 holes in the chest of Slim Ledbetter before he could even get his pistol out of his holster. big owl come busting in from outside, pistol raised. Bass turned just a hair in his direction. At the same time, Jake fired and the bullet tore the marshal's badge right off in his duster. Bass fired off 2 more shots, the one of which grazed Jake in his cheekbone and blowed his hat off. The other caught him in his private parts. I ain't never gonna forget, 'cause his eyes swole big as any one of my saucepans. He dropped his pistol, grabbed for his family jewels, and howled like a wolf in winter. Seminole Sam fired 1 shot at that long barrel buttline of his. It hit Big Al in his shoulder and spunked him all the way round to where he's facing the door he come in. Same time Seminole fired, Zach Fletcher squeezed both triggers of that double-barrel coach gun he had hid behind the bank counter. He had backshot Al and blowed his innards to the far wall. The only 2 people in the bank that ain't fired a shot yet is me and Ed Dinkins. I had my Winchester sighted at his Adam's apple, and I was ready to squeeze. I asked him what was it gonna be, and I noticed that P had done run all down the left side of his pants leg. Now, all this shooting done took place in the span of a blink, seemed like. When the smoke cleared and the deafness from all them pistols barking give me my hearing back, the thing would stick out in my head beside the smell of blood and gunpowder mixed is the pleasure of seeing nigger-hating Jake McClouster laying on that bank floor moaning like a fresh withered slave gal. I remember thinking, life ain't so bad. I recollect we tied them dead fellas down in a wagon, trussed up Ed and Jake by their hands and feet. Then we laid them down in the wagon alongside their dead clan. I remember Ed, he cried like a baby. After the skirmish, I'm thinking that we about to mosey on back down to Fort Smith for the bounty, 'cause the Turnbulls were worth a mite. But that ain't what Bass had in mind. We fetched them 3 dead men and the 2 what were alive about 200 miles south and east. Took most of 7 days crossing them plains. Jake suffered and moaned for 2 of them days before the devil welcomed him home to his lair. When we got just north of Wichita, we made camp and Bass sent up smoke signal. Now mind you, he ain't never said a word to me about this. He ain't never mumbled a word. But just before dusk, Dancing Eagle and a few of his braves come riding up. Bass ain't never opened his mouth. The whole time we was riding, I was thinking we taking them back to Fort Smith for the bounty. But that ain't the way he was thinking. Soon as Dancing Eagle and his men reared up, Bass took the canvas cover off from the 4 dead and the 1 left live laying in the wagon. He just nodded his head. Then the brave fetched him out the wagon, laid him across the backs of their ponies, and rid off. I remember they stiff as a walking plank. And poor Ed Dinkin, he's breathing, but he's a mess of a man. Now, thinking back on it, I ain't much of knowing what them braves did with them dead fellas. And I can only ponder what they might have done to the last living member of the Turnbull gang. I can only ponder. But what I does know is that in the almost 30 years that I read with Bass Reeves, after crossing at least 6 states and bringing in more than 3,000 bad men, he ain't never, not once, failed to keep his promise. And some years after we stopped riding, my grandson, he lent me a word. In 1910 it was, 'cause Bass had just passed on. He's about 20 or so, my grandson, going over yonder to that Tuskegee. He's smart as all get out. Make me proud, that boy, 'cause he the first of any of us to go to any kind of school. Anyway, we had this game we played where he learned me words. He would learn me a word and spell it out. And this here time he spelled out, I ain't never gonna forget, INTEGRITY. And he say, that's integrity. And it mean honesty, truth, honor, and courage. He asked me, what you think of that word, Grandpa? I mulled it over, and I give that child's question a lot of thinking before I answered it. Then I say, son, I think integrity was Black Bass Reeves, and may God rest his soul.